Raychaudhuri, he had been teaching at University of Calcutta, Jadavpur University. Currently, he is Professor Emeritus at Adamas University, Calcutta, and he had been the former head and coordinator of Center for Advanced Study Department of Economics, Jadavpur University. He had PhD from American University. He was visiting faculty at Indian Statistical Institute, which is a premier institution in Calcutta, and also Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Kolkata. He was a senior Fulbright scholar at Economic Growth Center, Yale University. He has also written numerous papers in international and national journals and edited books, and his notable book is India's Export and Analytical Study. His another very interesting book is going to come shortly by Sage Publication. He has worked on variety of subjects and topics within economics, and today we have requested him, and he has kindly agreed to deliver his thoughts on Indian economy amidst global and local shocks. So before we open the discussion and I give the floor to Professor Raychaudhuri, let me say a few words about our foundation, Economic Growth and Social Foundation for Economic Growth and Social thing. And we are a research-based think tank. We have done a lot of projects for the government, including Niti Aayog and many other ministries. And we had advisors such as Shri Dr. Bhalla and the current vice chairman of Niti Aayog, Shri Professor Suman Beri Bhalla, and even Arvind Virmani had been the chairman of this EGROW Foundation recently till he became the member of Niti Aayog. I am Ashok Vishandas. I had also served in the government of India at various levels. My last posting was chairman in the Commission on Agriculture Cost and Prices in the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. I have done some work on agriculture and many other sectors like health and other things, just as a brief introduction. And today's topic is very interesting. And let me say you, in the first upgrade of India's growth forecast by an international agency amid the global turmoil, the World Bank said the revision was due to higher resilience of Indian economy to the global shocks and better than expected second quarter numbers. The World Bank has revised upward India's economic growth forecast from 6.5% for India to 6.9% for 2022-23, saying that the world's first largest economy, the fifth largest economy, was showing higher resilience to global shock. That's very interesting. In the first upgrade of India's growth forecast by an international agency and global turmoil, the World Bank said its latest India's development update that the revision was due to higher resilience of the Indian economy to global shocks. India's economy grew at 6.3% in September quarter of 2022-23 compared to 13.5% in the preceding June quarter, mainly on account of contraction in the output of manufacturing and mining sector. Amid existing global challenges like tightening of monetary policy cycle, slowing growth, and elevated commodity prices, the Indian economy will experience lower growth in the year 2022-23 compared to the preceding year 2021-22. The presentation will discuss India's performance in recent time, and it will further provide policy to improve on the situation. Now I open the floor. I just hand over the floor to Professor Raychaudhuri, and he will take whatever time he takes. And towards the end, we will take up the questions, and the audience and our esteemed guests and other interested listener can either ask the question or can put their question in the chat box towards the end when he completes his thoughts on this. So, Professor Raychaudhuri, now floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much.
I am
Mr.
Ashok
Vishan Das. Yes, Mr. Vishan Das. In fact, I talked to you over the phone for a little while before we came here formally. I thank EGROW Foundation for inviting me here for this evening's presentation. In fact, before I go to my formal presentation, let me tell you that, like all of you, economist, non-economist, worker, salaried person, or whoever the person may be, the terms growth, inequality, etc., the things which we are familiar and we talk so much in economics, really make sense when they are in their social life. They observe it from their own experience. And I guess in the last 2-3 years, everybody, doesn't matter where the person is, has experienced in some way or other the pangs of COVID, now the Ukraine war, something which disturbed the standard time trend through which we were moving. And this observation, this realization in our life makes it interesting to know that are we going in the right path? What looks like, what awaits us in future? That's something with which I am bothered too. And whatever I am saying, I will not go into high scale or very difficult econometric things, because I know there are persons who may not be full economists. So what I will do, I will try to present things in something like a language which is understandable to all of us. And behind that may be other kind of work which we do as economists, but doesn't matter. So far we understand what we are trying to say, and we can share that and interact. That will serve my day. All right, so let me try start sharing. I hope I am given the authority to share things, right? And I hope I will be able to share it. Let me see whether I can do it or not. So probably I have to open this first and then go back to this, and let me see how we can do it.
Yeah. Professor Raychaudhuri, there is a bottom, there is an icon share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just let me see, where do I vanish? Okay, it must be, yeah, somewhere. Okay, no, there is a share button at the top, I guess, which I share is here.
It could be at the top as well. Yeah.
Okay, let
depending
me
on the setting. Yeah.
Yes. So let me just go to the PowerPoint presentation and share it with you, and I hope it will come. It hasn't come yet. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, can you see it really? What I'm?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, Vivek, you are on the.
Is it visible
let me
now?
try from our end, Vivek.
Is it visible or not?
Not yet.
No, it's not visible. So can you
Vivek, can you
Let
do?
me see whether I can do it or not, because WebEx is something which I do not use very often. So I don't know whether I can do it. Share content. This is something which I want to share. And if I share it, yeah, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. So that's exactly what I want to do. And let me just minimize this thing. Okay. Let me see what can I do with this. Okay. Actually, what happens is, I don't know whether the page down is working. No, it's not working. What's going on? Oh, it's working now. All right. This is the title which I have chosen. It's a kind of, setting things right. I would say setting the stage for a discussion. So I deliberately chose this name, Setting Things Right, Indian Economy Amidst Global and Local Shocks. So let me straight away go to the, is some kind of a, without going too much backwards, too much preamble. Let's start from this particular fact that, I mentioned the word shocks. So let me go to the global and local shocks. I start from the COVID situation. All of us know that during the COVID situation, we had a time when the Indian economy, it was sliding, its growth was sliding before COVID. I will have occasion to touch upon that. It's not that the first time Indian growth rate fell or Indian growth rate slowed down. It was slowing down before COVID too. If it's 2021, that's the COVID situation. In 1920 also, it was slow. And so naturally, things were not really to the liking of us, but it really got a big push from behind so that we fell to a certain extent, I would say, from a cliff downwards. And now we are trying to get around and trying to, as quickly we can climb up and climb beyond where we were before the COVID situation came. So what happened is in India, like all globally, what happened, we're trying to get out of this, and two entities were most important. One is the government. Government everywhere, all over the world, stepped in and tried to get the economy out of the quagmire where we were. And then we have the central bank, which also played a role. And it had differing kinds of role which they played all over the world. And if we look at the India, there are three things which happen. One is there is a direct transfer which happened, in the sense that like we have pension schemes which were there, we have free rice and wheat which was given and which is withdrawn from the 1st of January, I guess, but it played a very important role. 5 kg free of cost given to the poor people, and so on and so forth. There are other ways the direct transfer, it's basically a transfer to their bank account or real terms. And the second one is increasing liquidity in the economy. As you know, if the common sense says, if the banks are flushed with funds, then it's expected that they will lend at a lower interest rate. Although in India, the interest rate is not fully market driven. There are ways in which the interest rate can be influenced by the government action. But nonetheless, if the banks are flushed with funds, the expectation is that you can get, you means consumers, households can get loans, industry, especially the medium and small scale industries who really provide employment, they will get loans at a cheaper rate. And then the government also has guarantee program, in the sense that if you take loans from the banks, government stands guarantee that the if there is a default, then this happened in the first 1 year, 1.5 years, I guess, the government stood as guarantor that if the loans in the medium and small scale sector, they could not repay the loans, the government stands guarantor. Now, given all the steps, we know that, and I just quote from the budget speech of the Honorable Finance Minister in the 2021 budget, you see that we have, they call all packages together as Atmanirbhar Bharat package, A and B. And they call ANB1, ANB2, and ANB3, in the sense there's the first tranche, first set of announcement, the second set of announcement, third set of announcements. So 3 sets called ANB 1, 2, 3. And the total impact is 27.1 lakh crores. That's the estimate given by our finance minister, 13% of GDP. There are controversy whether that's really a transfer or basically something which was going on before. We talked up that, doesn't matter. What matters is 90% of this total package which we had is in terms of cheap and guaranteed credit. It's not, in fact, 10% is direct transfer and 90% is indirect, helping you to get cheap and guaranteed credit so that housing loans can be cheaper, durable consumer goods loan can be cheaper, MSME can get cheaper loans for their capital expenditure, and so on. Unlike the case in India, in developed economies, be it in the Western Europe, European Union countries, or if you look at United States or Australia for that matter, Japan, it's the other way around. They went more and quite, remarkably more towards direct transfer than this indirect way of cheap and guaranteed credit. But I just state the fact. The implications is not important for us, what we try to say, but it's a matter of fact which I should state. Then these interventions, as you can understand, there is one thing which happened. The aggregate demand, that means the purchasing power in the hands of either households or industry or agriculture, whichever way we call it. The common person who is involved in some activities, either manufacturing or services, whatever way you can call it, they have more purchasing power, and as a result, the aggregate demand in the economy increased. But as I would say, just by in the passing, it's not the main thing which I would dwell upon this. I talked about this in other papers, other seminars. There's a common word which is used nowadays, multiplier theory. The economists are very used to it, but this is used by ministers, state ministers and central ministers nowadays. There's something called a multiplier theory. So 1 rupee injected in will grow into, say, 5 rupees or 6 rupees, because it changes hands. People get money, then they spend. There is a round up spending and it grows. So the multiplier theory, which the government simply says, or the textbook says, didn't work for us, simply because all these theories which we talk are the theory which works under full certainty. That means you don't have uncertainty in life. And we know COVID really makes the whole situation so uncertain. In the first year or 1.5 years, you do not know whether you will have a job tomorrow. You do not know whether you will survive tomorrow. So under uncertainty, this multiplier becomes a lot less than what our textbook says. Unfortunately, we do not take that into account. We do not discuss this account, as if all the things which you are talking about is complete certainty. That if you give 1 rupee and people just work and spend and behave as if everything is certain, nothing uncertain in the world. Now, given this kind of a thing, what we found, especially in developed economies, that they reached what is called some kind of a full capacity out. What is full capacity? And this is something, it's a misnomer in some sense. Does full capacity means, suppose you have in the economy 100 machines and 200 labor. Does full capacity means 100 machines are working full and 200 labor are getting jobs? Is that the full capacity? Yes, conceptually true, but it's not a static concept. It's not that if you define full capacity today, tomorrow the same amount will be full capacity. Why? Because things are changing. You do not get parts and component. Your labor is not coming back to work. After COVID, this is a phenomenon which we observed in all the developed countries especially, that people are not returning to old jobs. There's scarcity of labor. There's logistic bottlenecks. And top of that, you have this Ukraine war, which disturbed the whole scenario. So full capacity really was not what we could expect before all this uncertainty. So probably what happened, this full capacity concept was at a lower level than what was assumed before COVID, before this uncertainty gripped the world, before Ukraine war gripped the world, before Chinese lockdowns, etc. So remember, given that the full capacity is a dynamic concept, is a variable concept, the developed countries reached what we call full capacity, wherever the whole workforce were trying to get work, they were absorbed. The capacity which is fully possible to be operated in terms of raw materials availability, in terms of parts and component availability. Remember, the supply chain was badly affected due to Chinese lockdowns and other. Given this, that was the full capacity at a lower level than under the normal circumstances. So what was the situation when COVID eased out? The manufacturing activities were, getting upward trend. Service activities, which largely depend on manufacturing, also service partly consumed by us. Like if we call a carpenter to work in my house, that's a direct consumption of the service, but is a service like a company tries to send their things in a warehouse by contracting a transport company. That's something which is consumed by the manufacturing sector. So service sector depends largely on manufacturing. It's not that service sector is an independent hanging thing. It depends on manufacturing. So hand in hand in what? Manufacturing geared up, service sector activities got a real fillip, uncertainty was reduced. So all around we see that lower income groups who spend a whole lot of their income on goods and services, their expenditure also went up. So overall, the aggregate demand started rising. And as you can see, since the capacity, which was not a static concept, at a lower level of your capacity, you are fully done with. You do not have extra labor to work with. You do not have spare capacity in the sense that you cannot operate those things given your raw materials and other availability. You reach the full capacity point. That's exactly what the developed countries like USA, they observed it. In European Union, some of these countries, they have it. So altogether, the whole cry was, we already had a full capacity situation. Now people are spending more. They are trying to go back to their old logic because they have money which was there either through the direct transfer of the government or indirect ways of cheap credit, etc. The demand is too much and we have full capacity. What's the result? You are demanding things, but there is not enough capacity to meet your extra demand which is coming after the COVID situation. So simple thing, prices will go up. If you go to the market and try to get potatoes when the potato cultivation, the crop of potato is low, what will happen? The potato price will go up. Exactly, that's what is happening in these countries. And what we call that it's kind of a situation where the economy was too much heated up and the prices start rising. So the policy, clear, contract your demand. Too much. People are demanding too much. We cannot meet it. There is too much price rise. So try to control direct transfer which we are giving. Stop it. Raise your interest rate, because then it will raise the mortgage rate. It will raise the rate at which the industries can get funds for their working capital, for their other kinds of capital expenditure. So altogether, housing, for example, and all these things apparently will cause or will lead to a softening of this heated situation. The demand will go down to a certain extent, and that will cause the prices rising to be controlled. But that's not affecting somewhat the employment scenario that much, because as you know, we have a situation where you are working in the capacity output. Workers who have come back to work after COVID situation, there are not any more workers to be had. So obviously there's too much demand. If you reduce the demand, it's not going to throw your people out, because you are already under very tight labor situation. You are trying to get workers. Like in United States, the transport industry badly hit. The e-commerce companies or these companies which are large warehouses from where they supply badly hit. And if the demand goes down, you are not going to throw out workers, because the workers who are working their full capacity. So that's a solution which we saw in the developed countries. So basically, it's a simple diagram. That's what the stagflation really means. You know, AS is the aggregate supply. What happens that, as you know, when the prices are going up, more profit, more production you can sell in the market, and naturally you can increase. This is the blue line. Normal circumstances, if your prices are higher, you will supply more in the market. And then at some point, which I call full capacity, there it's simply you cannot, even if the prices go up, you cannot increase your output. You are constrained by your supply chain, you are constrained by your raw material supply, you're constrained by labor supply. So if this is the demand, as you know, demand is a negatively sloped curve. All of us know, non-economists also know, if the prices go down, we demand more. And naturally what happens in the COVID situation, we pushed up due to government expenditure, direct transfer, money supply rise, more liquidity, lower interest, all this, the aggregate demand was pushed to a level where the prices were very high. So next situation, try to curtail it. Try to get the aggregate demand lower as much as you can. So what happened is, just to give you an idea, that look at the United States data. It's clear if you look at it, that if you look at the private consumption in the 2020, 2021, see that it went up 5.9%, like 8.3% private consumption. How did it go up so much? There is a base effect, no doubt, because after all, your consumption went down a lot. And if you calculate the percentage on this lower base, it will look a very high figure. But nonetheless, it went up by a huge margin, 8.3%. That's how the expenditure is rising of the people, households, for that matter. They're spending so much. And, gross fixed capital formation, that's the basically the investment. Everything was growing fast. So that's heating up the economy. So what happened? Try to reduce your demand. And that's exactly what we can see, that these things are growing so fast in here, 8.3, 5.7, too much heating up, too much demand creation. And then the prices are rising, as you can see, GDP deflated is the price. The price was going up 1.3%, very low level of price rise during COVID because there's not much of demand. But when the demand went up, the price rise, as you can see, went up by 4.5. It's almost like 3.5 times increase in prices. And that's a huge thing for them in the United States. And then it went up more in 2022, 6.9% price rise. So you can see the response is obvious. We cannot meet this extra demand, which all of a sudden came in 2021 and 22, this intervening period, because so much money is pumped into the economy. So what happened is, we have an indirect stimulus, no doubt, as I said, liquidity, etc. in India. Look at the Indian story. That's what interests us more. I just mentioned the US story just to give you a similarity and where we differ. If you look at the Reserve Bank of India data, and that's something which I rely a lot, this is a OBICUS survey. OBICUS survey of Reserve Bank of India is a survey which captures the manufacturing sector story, that how much capacity they are using. And if you look at that, and that's the figure which I want to tell you, look at these figures, 2018, 19, and so on. If you look at this story, I can get this. After all, this is happening, that our capacity utilization, there was respondents is, this is survey, so you cannot expect everybody to respond, but their responses are over a large number of different kinds of industries. And what happened in 2018, 19 onwards, this is already falling. So not enough demand or supply side problem, whatever was the case, industries were reduced their capacity utilization. So we have a lot of capacity. We are not in a full capacity situation at all. So what happened? Look at 2021, it fell to 47.3%. It's less than 50% capacity. Then it picked up, because as you know that 2021, 21, 22, these quarters, the government pumped in money and there is liquidity, more liquidity, less interest and so on. So aggregate demand also went up in case of India. But nonetheless, this is 2021, 21, 22, quarter one is 60%. Then it went up 72, 75, again fell back to 72.4% in the first quarter of 22, 23. So we are nowhere near full capacity. Full capacity doesn't mean 100, but 80, 85 is something minimum. So we have excess capacity, reserve capacity. Remember that. That's it. I want you to remember, we do not have a situation where we do not have capacity. If demand goes up, we have capacity to produce more. That's the story. So if we go down a little bit here, so let me just go to the, let me go to this, and I will come back to this. So if this is the full capacity in case of India, suppose we are looking at the Indian story. So what happens? That we are at a situation where we are demand and supply intersect. Actually, this is the figure where we are. So this is the actual, we are here. Now what happens? Suppose your aggregate demand suddenly goes up this way. This arrow shows that it pushed up. That means we are increasing our aggregate demand because uncertainty is reduced, government has pumped in a lot of money, etc., etc. So demand is being pushed up. So what is happening? As you push up this, you can understand the intersection will go to the right of this curve. So higher prices and higher quantities. But if we are below full capacity, what happens? You have chances, you have a possibility to increase your output. Unlike the story in the developed countries where you have simply this line and we are here in the vertical portion. So if your demand is heated up, then you have to reduce your demand, because otherwise your prices becomes uncontrolled, because you cannot increase your capacity output. It's already full. But in India, we are below the full capacity output. That's the Reserve Bank survey, clear. And I will show you that two major things which matters. One is what capacity the industry is working. The other is, what are we in a situation where we are not having workers? Is there a situation where we are demanding labor, we are not getting it? So wages are so high that the industry is saying, no, fine, we cannot increase output. I will show that we have enough labor, enough unemployed labor to manage this show. So if we are not in this vertical portion, full capacity, why do we bother so much about controlling your aggregate demand by the methods we will just discuss? One of the methods which is very important nowadays is this increasing interest rate. I will come back to that in a moment. But what I want you to keep in mind is that if this goes up to the right, it's not only the prices are rising, but your output is rising too. So it's not an unblemished thing. It's not something that it's only prices are rising. I don't understand what is annotation. Anyway, this is all annotated: aggregate demand, aggregate supply, full capacity, actual. So prices are here. So it's a the movement. You have to just understand, visualize this. So what I'm trying to say, that in this situation we have scope to increase our supply. And if there is a scope that if your demand is rising, you can try to push your supply also by relaxing your supply constraints. What are the constraints in supply? We have problems in parts and component, we have problems in supply chain, etc., etc. But we do not have a problem in labor front. There's enough labor. We have capacity which we can utilize. So can we make a policy that instead of just viewing the whole thing from the parlance or from the viewpoint of a country like USA, which is thinking that we are in the vertical portion, we can do nothing. If we just for a moment believe that we are not in a vertical portion, but the rising portion, where a rise in demand can be matched by increasing supply, so that it's not a price rise alone. You can increase employment, you can increase output, and a better policy maybe if we can shift our supply to a certain extent so that things get better. So this thing, somewhat other, did not really matter so much to our policy issues. We somewhat took it, I would say, blindly, that if USA and European Union has a vertical aggregate supply curve and they are trying to reduce demand because otherwise prices cannot be controlled, we should do the same. They have a full capacity, we don't. So they can call this a stagflation. Prices are rising, output cannot be changed. We do not have that kind of a situation. We have capacity which we can utilize. We have labor force which you can utilize. So naturally you can, for some reasons or other, not constrained by a capacity, you can increase your output along with prices. So price rise should not bother so much. It can bother you, but not like the way they are viewing it in USA and European Union countries. So it's a price rise only, nothing can be done. And let me go back to a moment for this, just a moment, a little bit on what I said. I've written this. So obviously what's happening is this: Ukraine war, Chinese lockdown, problems all on the supply side, not on the demand side. So our supply is not full capacity. One of the reasons is we are not getting enough raw materials. That's one of the things which is problematic for us. Now, what is happening in the USA or other countries, like led by US Fed, They are increasing the rate of interest because to them, the single most important thing by which they can reduce the demand is interest rate. Because mortgage and interest rate are prime movers for the USA. As you know, the consumption leads the whole growth story in any country, and USA or European Union is the same story. So control the interest rate, that will control the housing demand, that will control the mortgage rate, that will simply reduce your EMIs, equated monthly installment as we call it. All the purchase will be controlled, and you have a stagflation because supply cannot be increased. Reduce the demand, that's the only way out. And we, in a sense, this prompted the Reserve Bank of India to raise interest too. Now, one thing you must realize, that in this interconnected globalized world, RBI cannot act alone. When the US Fed is increasing the rate of interest, Bank of England is saying the same, European Union, all countries are following the same thing. Then if the Reserve Bank says, no, I will not do it, I have excess capacity, I have enough capacity. So if the demand is rising, we can increase the supply. So it's not a situation like yours, where demand is rising, I cannot increase the supply. So it's stagflation, stagnation and inflation. We do not have that kind of situation. So I will not raise the interest. I cannot do it. For the simple reason, if I do not raise the interest rate, then the foreign capital which comes to India, because our rate of interest in real terms apparently is higher than their countries, that's why the foreign capital comes to our countries. That will simply not come. Because if I do not raise the interest rate, my country investment will become less attractive because your return will be less in a sense. So if the interest rate is higher, that will give an indication that return for investment in a country like us will be higher. So you cannot sit idle. You cannot have your hands off and say, well, US Fed and world other central banks do whatever they do, I do not do it. So I do not blame Reserve Bank. Reserve Bank has to do it. But I just want to push this idea that this whole, concept which has mesmerized us in recent discourse, that stagflation is something where we are in, that's not true. That's the most important message which I want to do that. In fact, there's an RBI report on currency and finance just came out in April 2022. I quoted the page also. They have an econometric study. Exactly came to what I am saying. That is, the demand was a problem during the COVID time. Less demand, so increasing demand was the main thing. It's a demand-driven thing. Less demand, problem. More demand, also creating a problem because you do not have enough supply. But now it's a supply side problem. You are constrained on the supply side. Demand is there, no doubt. Try to reduce the demand, partially, no doubt, but put more emphasis on relaxing on supply. Constraints on the supply side. You have capacity, you have workers. So try to increase your output. That's the panacea. And I got complete support in the RBI research report, which came out in Currency and Finance. So in a sense, whatever the Monetary Policy Committee in RBI does, but the RBI research lends support to what I am trying to say. Now, the important thing here, which I want to mention in this case, see that this is a national income data, which was the most recent data, which is published, advanced estimates, which is published by the CSO, National Statistical Organization. And so the most important thing which I want to, in fact, pay attention to is this private consumption. If you look at this private final consumption, this had a share of 56.9%, has gone up to 57.3 and again fell down to 56.6. You know that, in fact, I have a diagram which I can show you. It was more than 60% if you look at the figures of 2010, 11, 12, 13, more than 60%. That was a driving force. In any economy, the driving force is how much the households spend on housing, on durable goods, on daily goods. That's what's the most important driving force. From 60 or 61% 10 years, 8 years back, it has come down to 56%. And now it's somewhat static there at around 56%. Has gone up a little bit more now. But the point is this reduction in consumption is creating a huge problem. So on top of that, if you believe in a stagflation story and try to control your production, try to control your employment, this will go down more, because this will hit the unskilled workers first, because they are the ones who are hit most when unemployment is there. So if you reduce employment, if you reduce production, who will be hit? The persons who spend more out of their income. And so this private consumption is not going to go up if you do that kind of a policy. That will lead to more problems than what you have now. So if we go by a stagflationary story, we are out for trouble, because in future the private final consumption will be lower, and that will simply slow down the growth of the economy, no matter how much the government spends. So let me just, you can see the story. If you see the expenditure component of GDP, as I was telling you, if you look at the 91, 92, how much is the percent of GDP? Look at PFC, that's the consumption. It was close to 70%. That's what I'm trying to say. Now it has gone down steadily. It is going down steadily, and it's going down steadily. And it has gone, as I said, is now lower than 60% in some periods. In 2020-21, that's not shown here, but it was lower than even 60%, 56, 57%. Why it is going down? That's another story, another speech we have to spend on that. I don't want to touch much upon this. Two main reasons, as I will tell you, is one is inequality rising. There are clear economic logic and economic theory which we can prove, and I've written a paper in one of the books which is published by Routledge and published by some of my friends there in Delhi School of Economics and Indian Institute of Management. They were the editors there, and it clearly showed that in mathematical you can show that if the inequality goes up, this is bound to happen, and inequality is growing in India. If you look at the uncertainty has gone up for the common person. The uncertainty of job, certainty of your salary, wages has gone up. Two things which is reducing this. So if I say that just, pushing a stagflationary story, pushing the government expenditure more, will it reverse this trend? I'm not sure. You have to look at the reasons, the main cause why this private consumption expenditure is going down. And I don't see much discourse on that. That's really bothers me a lot. And I just repeated the story here. I don't want to. And this is about as I was telling, we don't have a problem of unemployment. And that in a sense that we have a labor force shortage. No, in fact, and in fact, these stories which we get, 7.6% urban unemployment rate as they show it. I will come to this point a little later, because these figures do not make much sense to me. Why it doesn't make much sense, I will tell you. And this is a better figure. If you look at this, the CMI figure, which shows that the most unemployment is the graduate level, then 10 to 12 standard is 15%, and lowest unemployment, if you look at, is up to 5th standard is 3%. So as you go up your educational level, your unemployment rate is going up. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Why is it so? And as you know, in India, if you look at this, how many people have qualified 10th standard? Not more than 30% of our school and college going population. 30% is on the upper side. It should be lower, maybe 27% or something. So most of them are in the 5th standard or 6th or 7th standard. Why are the unemployment is lower? They are mostly the unskilled workers. In the skilled workers, unemployment rate is high. The reason is very simple. For the unskilled workers, the job is informal, unorganized sector. For the formal workers, it's mainly skilled workers, educated people, educated job seekers. So the data reflects the two story. The data does not reflect the two story. For the unskilled workers, unorganized sector workers, because if you go by the definition of International Labour Organization, they call somebody employed if you have a decent job. What's the definition of decent job? A contract, written, benefits, retirement life, certainty of jobs. This is an essential component of a decent job. And if you do not have a decent job, you will be called unemployed. And here, all this unemployment low because they are in unorganized sector, and we can at best call there is huge underemployment. They are not working to the fullest potential. So altogether, we have enough labor workers, unlike in USA and European Union. They are scrambling their head, scratching their head, what to get the workers from. They are scratching their head that they do not have enough spare parts from China. They are scratching their head, they do not have enough oil for Ukraine war. Do we have the same situation in India? My point is no. We are not in stagflation. Enough scope to increase your capacity. Better, we should stress as a medium-term policy. I'm not saying overnight this will happen. Medium-term policy should be relaxing your supply side constraint. Relax it as quickly as possible, as much as you can. That should be the goal of the economy, the primary goal, not to reduce demand, not to go for this kind of a situation that contract your demand. Get the demand reduced as much as possible. That's the panacea. Because otherwise the inflation will be there. We cannot increase our capacity. Not a story which applies to countries like us. I'm not going into the growth projection. And the other thing which is bothering it, in fact, I put it in an exchange rate dynamics, and I mentioned that the whole problem is when the US Fed is raising its interest rate, we have to do it. Otherwise, we are having problem because, as you know, our exchange rate is governed not by trade now. Our export-import trade are badly hit, and we are recovering that, but our deficit is skyrocketed now. It's a huge balance of trade deficit. So exchange rate dynamics is controlled by the investment, the foreign investment which you are getting. And as a result, if you cannot keep a tally with in fact, I use the term, if you do not dance to the tune what US Fed is doing, your investment will dry up. And what will happen to your exchange rate? Can we control it? We can't. So it's in a kind of an integrated world where monetary and fiscal policies to a certain extent is not European Union style coordination, but it's nonetheless influenced by each other and influenced a lot by what the US Fed is doing. So we are in a situation, we like it or not, we go by what they are saying. And the worst thing, if you look at the foreign investment data, if you look at the net portfolio investment, it's minus 16,000. And it was, in fact, we haven't got the data for the last 2 quarters, but in the 2021-22, during April, August, it was positive. And look at the April, August data for 22-23, minus 6,000. So it was plus 1,691, it's minus 6,823. That's the portfolio investment. That's one of the biggest things which we have. So we are in a dire situation. Raising interest rate, no way out. We do not have any choice whatsoever. We have to raise it in order to sustain this portfolio investment. Because as you know, we call it no arbitrage condition. If the interest rate in the treasury bills go up, that's the indicators. What will be a return from share markets in our economy? They go hand in hand. So we have to give this signal to them that all is well in our country too. So bring money. So basically, this is what I have summed up in this whole thing. Whatever I said, it's all there in this small thing, small point-wise thing. But this is really, what bothers me, as I said, the consumption expenditure is the driving force in India now. We are no more in a world where the government is controlling 40% of GDP. Their share has come down to less than 20% now. So they are not the driving force. The driving force is now consumption expenditure, which we see in European Union or other countries. At least in one sense, we are somewhat similar to them. But why the private consumption expenditure is doing? The one thing I just mentioned here, this inequality, growing like anything. Who will reverse this? Who will intervene? Leave to the market? Everywhere, all over the world, it's growing. In India is no exception. That's a bad thing for us when the consumption expenditure is cut. The other is uncertainty. You must bring more uncertainty into the economy. But with the economy so much, controlled and dominated by unorganized sector, can you bring, in the true sense, certainty in life of a worker who is working in an unorganized sector economy? working in agriculture worker, working in urban sector as pushing a cart, or working somewhere even in the formal sector. Informalization is growing in formal sector. They subcontract out to companies now. It's a huge phenomenon in India. And these subcontracted things again have no certainty of jobs. So it's it's a real problematic thing for us. And basically, I talked about problems. And just one little thing before I finish, another 2 minutes, if you permit me. Uh, One thing which I think is a very important thing which the government is taking, production linked incentives. What is that? That's one thing which is aimed basically to relax the supply side constraint. One scheme which I find is direct related, better late than never. This PLI scheme is nothing but trying to grab some of the companies going out of China, inviting them to produce their parts and components in India. That's going to relax your constraint, because we have constraint in pharmaceutical sector, we have constraints in electronic sector, we have constraint in transport sector, we have constraint in electrical manufacturing sector. You name it. There are so many things we depend on them for the parts and components. This scheme is a good scheme. I hear a lot of problems in PLI scheme, but nonetheless, a scheme might have problems, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If the scheme has a good intention and right step to relax the supply constraint, we should carry it on. And if it works, it's good for us. We get out of this stagflationary mentality. We realize that capacity should be increased. Aggregate demand should not be crushed. That will lead to two things: a more certainty in the economy, a better distribution of income, a rising consumption expenditure, and that's going to solve our growth problem to a large extent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Raychaudhuri. It was a masterful exposition, and you have raised very, very interesting issues and given very, very deep insights and very interesting, academically rich, and even very convincing to non-economists also. And these issues you raised about the uncertainty of the job, the decent jobs, and how you see India, because in India, as you have correctly said, based on your research work and the empirics also corroborate what you say about, say, for example, MG Narega. It's nowhere near the decent job, and the unskilled workers are doing the, because we have to upskill the skills of unskilled workers. So that is one aspect. And how do you see where in India you think will uh, will stand, say, in 25 years down the road, in terms of the decent work, the uncertainty reduction, and private final consumption expenditure should go up. So you have given this, but can you throw more light on this before we open the platform for the questions? Because I can see few questions are there, and there may be many our listeners who would like to ask the question from you. Over to you. Just my few observation on this, Professor Raychaudhuri ji.
Let me see what the chat messages are, and there
Right.
are some questions which are there. Let me just see. Okay, there are too many good evenings. What
Yeah,
kind of
stickiness.
stickiness, yeah, we can experience with regard to employment increase when the happens to be relaxing the supply bottlenecks? Well, we don't have a wage stickiness story. We don't have a wage stickiness story. Wage is flexible, and we have made it more flexible by labor market reforms, which has been done. There are four different things which have been pushed in our labor bill. As you know that more industries now can have a hiring and firing business. So basically, uh, that stickiness is not there. But if you say that there is some stickiness, I don't really understand what you mean by stickiness. Stickiness, if you mean that we cannot easily relax the constraint like parts and component. As I said, it's a medium-term policy you have to do. All of a sudden, you cannot all relax all your, you are not getting enough your ingredients for pharmaceutical industry. Can you relax it overnight? Possibly not. No. Can you relax that you are not getting enough integrated circuits for your electronics industries? You cannot relax it overnight. But that PLI scheme, as I said, is a good beginning, which is trying to get some of these industries locate there. But unfortunately, the Vietnam has done much better than us when these things was happening in COVID and industries, companies are moving out of China. They grabbed most of it, and we lost out there too. Hope that our foreign missions and everything gears up to this and do exactly what is needed instead of just getting a little sleeping partner for that matter. We need different approach and solutions for inflation increase. I talked the whole thing about this, so I'm not going to answer this anymore. We already answered it. What kind of stickiness we can experience related to employment increase when there happens to be relaxing the supply? I also answered to a certain extent this question. We need different approach and solutions for inflation. This is the same thing which is repeated here. I don't think I discussed all about this. So I am not going to answer this question separately. According to me, consumption expenditure should be increased by creating employment opportunities. Absolutely. I don't have anything to say. But as you see that employment opportunities can only be increased if you believe. One thing is that we sort of have three verticals, usually agriculture, industry, services. But we do not realize the service sector, which occupies 55 to 60% of our GDP, doesn't generate that much of employment. But we must realize that the service sector, maybe 50% of their growth depends on manufacturing, because they are the ones who consume services. 50% we consume directly as household, 50% they. So if the manufacturing sector do not pick up, you cannot expect your services sector to pick up. So you cannot expect that the employment elasticity of service sector is much higher than others. So you cannot expect the employment will be created overnight. That realization should come to us. The service sector do not hang on balance from air. It's so much dependent on the manufacturing sector for its survival. So I think I gave the answer to well, can wealth tax help in reducing the pressure in inequality? People have suggested wealth tax. I'm not too sure about that. We experimented with wealth tax in history. If you look at the Indian tax history, we did. But then we got rid of that. We went experimented with the expenditure tax, that people hide income, so go for expenditure tax. That also didn't succeed. So I'm not sure if you do a wealth tax, people in some way or other, how the wealth will be calculated is a problematic thing. But nonetheless, like people like Piketty and others, they are suggesting that the wealth tax is the only way out. Only income tax will not do. Trial and error. We can see whether we can do it or not. Let the USA and European Union do it. Their accounting is much better. Let them do it and see how it goes. Then we can perhaps go for this in future. Interest up and not curbing household demand. Do you recommend raising fiscal deficit? No, I didn't say interest rate up. I said interest rate you cannot keep up independently. If you do not dance to the tune of USF, you are dried up of all foreign portfolio investment. Can we sustain it with the exchange rate? If it hits 90 rupees a dollar, can we just manage our export bill of fertilizer and edible oil and petroleum spare parts? No, we can't. So interest rate has to rise. But the problem is we should not be too bothered about this, that interest rate hike should be in tandem with which they are doing. We should moderate it, keeping in mind that we do not have a situation of stagflation anymore. So fiscal deficit rise, yes, at times fiscal deficit should rise. But again, as you know, if I do this fiscal deficit rise according to Keynesian method, that we do not believe in what you are saying textbook, I must spend government, they call it capex expenditure, capital expenditure. So we must have more funds there. I do support that public expenditure of public money on infrastructure is a must if the private investment is to go up. But then if you have a too much deficit, your rating will be downgraded by all these companies who do this rating. S&P, Moody's. So in this world where we depend so much on foreign capital now for many things, if S&P and Moody's just downgrade us just because our fiscal deficit is crossing the limit, where do we go? That's the whole problem we have. In this world, you cannot act alone. Recording of the session, how to tackle unorganized employment.
That I will let them know towards the end. And in case there is any other question, maybe we can take one or two questions more and before we wind up.
Yes, very fascinating, interesting, informative. We only decrease in employment, manufacturing demand, and many more due to COVID period. We have to focus on Russia and Ukraine war. Is it affect our service sector or any other sector? It affects everything. As I'm trying to say, it's interrelated. It affects our manufacturing sector most, but that affects the services sector. So you cannot answer this question taking them independent, sectors. You can't. So you have to take it in a holistic way. Why we are not able to compete with China? Can't answer that in this seminar. Maybe if EGROW wants, I can spend another day on China and India if you want to.
Yes, we would like to. Yes.
Interest rate hike is one solution, but one is the same questions. I don't have anything more to answer.
Right. Okay. So it was very interesting, masterful exposition, Professor Raychaudhuri. You have covered very wide ground and in depth. I'm thankful to you on my own behalf and on behalf of on behalf of our EGROW Foundation and I'm sure each one of our audience who attended this enjoyed, and then there was a quantum jump on our understanding about your perspective, and EGROW will be very glad to invite you once again on China. I have noted it down. Regarding the recording, that we will put on our website by tomorrow afternoon, and surely it will be available to all of them. Next week, on the coming Friday, we will have another webinar, and the details of that will be announced shortly, maybe in a day or two. And I'm thankful to once again to Raychaudhuri ji, professor, and then he has given wonderful insights into the issue on global and the local shocks, because that we understand, and many people say what is the global shock leads the local shock or the vice versa, but then there may be, as you correctly said, everything is interconnected and intertwined, and one cannot factor what are the regions for the local shock or in a global shock, but they work together and in tandem, and we get the resultant effect. That's we have understood much better now compared to what is there, and we will surely come out with another, and we'll invite you separately on the China's issue, because the supply and all those things, because we are not able to utilize our capacity full, as you correctly said. During last 4 years, the capacity has not gone beyond 76% from 2018 onwards. That means 2 years prior to COVID also, our capacity was underutilized to the extent of about 24%. That was the maximum, but it varied. And that is also a question. And then another is, and that is affected by the constraint of the raw material. So these are the certain issues. We'll definitely ponder over it, and this is wonderful. And thank you once again to one and all, and particularly Raychaudhuri and all the very interesting our audience also. So thank you very much to one and all, and we'll see all of you on the coming Friday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vishan Das, and Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy New Year to you and to everybody, to your families. Yeah. Thanks indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
So we now close the session.
Yeah.